Welcome to the Midland Money Mindset. This is a podcast that's all about getting your mind right when it comes to all things money. In every episode, we go deep with engaging guests who provide tangible takeaways and a whole lot of joy along the way. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I enjoyed having them. Let's dive into today's show. Well, I have the pleasure today of being with Elsie Escobar, the Director of Community and Content at Libsyn. And it's amazing to be here. We use Libsyn, so we're a client of theirs, and that's the platform we use. So thank you for joining us today, Elsie.
You bet. I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's great to be here. So listen, I want to share with our audience a little bit of background about you. And, maybe you could give us your path to becoming the Director of Community and Content at Libsyn. How did you get there?
Oh my gosh, there's like it's a long, windy road.
Aren't they all though?
Aren't they all? I know. I'm gonna just cut it all the way to when I just got into podcasting as a whole. I started podcasting in July 2006. So I've been around for a long time doing this fun thing, getting behind the microphone and recording stuff. And at that time, I've always been one of those people that really likes to figure things out as they pertain to whatever it is that I want to do. And podcasting really just inspired me and got me incredibly fired up about the potential of this medium. So I just dove in headfirst, trying to learn everything about it. I had zero idea as to what I was doing at all. And in the process of doing so, I also discovered, obviously, lots of podcasts, lots of podcasters, and a few of them that lived very close to where I lived at that time, which was Los Angeles. So I kind of started participating in local podcaster meetups. I started to get to know what was going on in terms of the podcasting space. There was a little conference that was called the Podcasting and Portable Media Expo.
Okay.
And it was held in Ontario, California at that time. And so I went to this event, and I was possibly one of the only women at this event,
okay.
and let alone a woman who was podcasting about yoga, which was also very strange and weird because that's what was my first podcast at that time. And I remember even just walking. I didn't even sign up to attend the conference. I just walked the show floor, if you will. And as I was walking the show floor, I got called in to be part of like a panel for women in podcasting because there weren't many of us walking around. And I had just started podcasting literally like 2 months before. So I was already part of this panel. And in doing so, given the fact that I kind of stood out a little bit, I kind of got to be well regarded in this space because the industry was so small, even at that time. Sure. And I got on a show called Podcast 411, which was and is co-host, or it's not co-hosted, but hosted by Rob Walsh, who is the VP of Podcaster Relations at Libsyn. And, when he interviewed me on his show, we were just, after we finished talking, he was like, we were just like sharing information that was not on the show. And I said, you know what, I'm going to be leaving Los Angeles. I'm doing a little bit of a, life change, if you will. And he was like, oh, okay. And I go, hey, I don't even know if he said like he was looking for somebody to work with, or if I said, hey, if something comes up in terms of podcasting, let me know. And he goes, oh, I might, let's meet. And this is where the conference comes in. The Portable Media Expo conference comes in to the mix. And he's like, let's meet at Ontario and talk. And I was like, okay. So I went and talked with him, and he essentially offered me a job because he had just been hired at Libsyn himself, and he was building a team. And I said, okay. And it was kind of like one of those things where I came in as I was part of his podcaster relations team at that time. And I was just corresponding with podcasters back and forth, trying to get them not only obviously to host with Libsyn, but really at that time, primarily, I was sort of managing the podcaster relations side when dealing with advertising campaigns and things like that. So there's an advertiser that comes in and they want to have, 10 sports podcasts. Right. Can you look at our database and see if you can find ones that fit? And then I started those communications with the podcasters. And so I did that for a while. And then in the process of me being there, I sort of took it upon myself to write a lot more stuff for the blog. I started I really started to run the social media accounts. I used to open up whatever new social media was going out there, and I was like, let's get Libsyn in there. And I was doing a lot of really impromptu setup of what I didn't know at that time was essentially content management and social management and community management, which I naturally did. I didn't know that was a thing. Right. I was just very curious about all of the things that could happen. And since I was already corresponding so much at that time, at the beginning in podcasting, all of us were slightly on the nerdy side and were early adopters in all the things. So the podcasting space and the podcasting community was a very early adopter with Twitter specifically. Sure. Lots of the other social media, even services that no longer exist, because there used to be so many of them that used to be popping up all the time. We were all there. We were all communicating, all kinds of live streaming stuff way back in the day. All of us were live streaming things at that time too. So I already knew that space was really vibrant, and I wanted to have Libsyn on board most of the time. Again, just intuitive. Nobody told me to do these things. And I kind of, it escalated, I guess, if you will, now 16 years later, where I'm doing it because I've been doing it for so long. And it has a title.
Yeah, right? It seems like you created your role almost.
I did
over time, just by doing what you were naturally thinking was the right thing to do, and help Libsyn out and create that brand and marketing efforts. And it seems like you almost created that brand. So, as somebody like yourself who was, I think you're a very early adopter. I don't know that I even listened to podcasts or even knew about podcasts in 2006. So I really think that you're one of the pioneers and adopters of that medium. Why do you podcast? What was your why behind podcasting?
Oh gosh, when I first started, it really was because in my other life, I was an actor, and I had acting training, and I had been on stage primarily. That was where I cut my teeth, I guess, was on stage. And then I was in LA doing some film and television stuff at that. But whenever you do film and television, the majority of your time as an actor is spent as a non-working actor, right? You are always looking for jobs, and then you do whatever you can on the side to make money to survive, but it's really just a matter of going on auditions. So it's never, you're not really actually ever working in this space. And I had felt, I had never had that experience before, because when I was on stage, I would do shows, and shows used to take up, anywhere from 6 weeks to 2 months. And you would be working on a project and you would stop. And it was this constant thing that you were working in it. And then when I went to LA, that was not a thing. And so I felt very, powerless, and I didn't have a creative anything happening. I was, you could do auditions, but auditions are really just a second of your day, essentially. And you never get a chance to work. And so when podcasting popped in, I thought, this is a great opportunity. I immediately thought, I can create my own show. I can do my own thing. And I started to think about all of these wonderful new shows that I was going to be doing, but I had no idea how to do that. So I thought, okay, I'm going to just start by recording things that I'm already doing, that, just to record, because I've never recorded anything. Right. And in doing so, I started recording the yoga podcast, or a yoga podcast, because I was teaching. In addition to serving tables, I was also teaching yoga full time, essentially. And I thought, okay, I'll just record these classes, because my students are always telling me, I wish I could take you with me. And I thought, oh, this is an easy way for me to have them take me with them.
Sure.
Right. And so I did that. And it turns out when I started, nobody else was doing that. And I, again, called a little bit of attention to myself, and that show became kind of popular at that time. And so the other shows, my ideas were like, I'll do that soon. I'll do that soon. I'll do that soon. And I never executed on, all the fun things I wanted to do.
Well, the yoga one seems like it was a big success, and then and then I guess Libsyn saw the the success there that you were having, and then they wanted it all for themselves. So it's I guess it's a win-win, right?
Yeah. So I guess to answer your question, I started podcasting because it gave me a creative outlook or outlet.
Right.
If you will, on the space. I didn't think that anything beyond, I just want to be creative and create stuff. I didn't have a long, I'm going to do this with it now. I didn't have that idea.
I think it's a great way for people to utilize it as that kind of outlet. And, it doesn't have really a high barrier to entry. It's just really a time commitment, a little bit of equipment, and, you could share what you're passionate about and also have a way to express yourself as well. So, I think it's a great medium to do that. So I have a question. We've been a client of Libsyn for a while, right? And I know I have this question. I don't know if other people who use the platform do also, but what does that word mean?
It means liberated syndication.
Okay.
Libsyn. So it's just a joining of those two words together. And, back in the day, of course, I think one of the biggest barriers to entry for a lot of creators was not necessarily the fact that they could express themselves and have things to say, but it was the technical stuff, right? It was that thing of, I recorded my thing. How do I put this thing so that other people can consume it? And then when you figured that out, then you realized, oh my gosh, it's challenging to deliver that media to whoever wants to get it. Wow, that's something that we need to solve too. And then there was the other aspect, which was, what if you had that one piece of media and you put it up, and then like hundreds, right, of people at the same time,
right,
wanted to download or wanted to consume that media, then it did weird things to the place where it was being called from, right? You like all of these little bits you didn't even know existed. And so the guys over at Libsyn came up with this idea of being able to democratize the ability for that media to be accessed easily by the masses, but also for you as a creator to not have to bear the burden of having to put that media somewhere that was yours, because that bandwidth, that little bit of like people coming in and grabbing it and having you putting it up there, ended up being very expensive, especially at that time, hosting media, which is larger files, and then having other people try to grab it all at the same time, really just exponentially was too it was just too much money for somebody who's just trying to create a little like talking voice for a little bit, right?
We're grateful for what you've done, because you've made it super easy for us to basically distribute our content across multiple, if not all, platforms. So it's been definitely, and pun intended here, liberating for us to be able to do that over all these various, method and means of people wanting to consume this and not hindering our already technological platform by getting jammed up with all these, folks that are looking to listen to our show, which is, hugely helpful. So I know in your, when you talked about your path to becoming the director of community and content for Libsyn, you talked about, how your role had changed over the years. But what does your role entail today? What exactly are you doing on a day-to-day basis, so our listeners have an understanding of that?
Yeah, so there are a lot of moving pieces to this. So there is the basic, some of the basic stuff that now the role of director brings to the mix. And it's something that I'm still also working through because I am a doer by nature, meaning I am a creator at heart. I like to get my hands dirty and I like to do the things. I like to, write the stuff because I'm also very adept at being able to create media in lots of different forms. And so when somebody says like, hey, I need a piece of a graphic of some kind, I'm like, oh, I could do that. Or, hey, I need a voiceover. Oh, I can do that. I'm like one of those people who is like a Swiss Army knife when it comes to creating content. But the role of director comes from the management, with a now management side of it. And it's something that I'm also like living into, if you will, because now my brain is the most important part of the reason that I have this title is because I do see how all the pieces fit. I do see how the story of the brand can get out there. I do instinctually know like, ooh, we need to create a blog post about this or a video about this, or let's do a campaign around this, right? Like I can feel that and I know enough about the industry as well as my passion for trends in the tech industry and marketing and social, like I know all of these things very deeply that I can kind of get a sense of like, oh, this is what's coming up next. Let's tap into that. And so now my job is to guide the team to be able to take on what the thematics are or the story that we're telling at any given time without me creating all of the things, right? Because, and that's been a really hard transition because again, I just want to do it.
Right.
But I'm only me, right? I can create either one video or I can delegate our ability for a team to create 10 videos and 3 blog posts. And let's do this, how to start a podcasting thing. And let's talk about video podcasting here. And let's, what are we going to be talking about at the conference? And can we have a meetup? And what if we have so there's like so many different aspects to this. And that is kind of what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to guide the team to continue to create what I keep telling my team is helpful. It has to be helpful. It has to be something that somebody reads and immediately goes, oh, now, wow, that was really helpful. Like
I should be doing that.
I should be,
right?
Yeah, totally.
So listen, as a pioneer, as a pioneer in the podcasting space, how have you seen the space transform over the years, and what do you think is the next for the podcast community? What do you see as the next big thing, if you will?
Yeah, before it felt to me, and I'm actually going to talk just from the independent side, and maybe I'll bring a layer into maybe more of the corporate side that has come into the scene, because that's one of the biggest things. But when I first started, we all had to learn almost everything. So when you were going to put a podcast out, it was essentially on you to record it, figure it out on your computers, find a way to, get the stuff edited. Where do I put it? Like you figured out all the pieces, including publishing it onto a blog post or being able to get it out on social or download. I mean, all of the pieces, we all had to figure out how to do it. So almost everybody that was podcasting at that time had essentially about the same understanding of how to do all the bits. And if you didn't know how to do it, somebody could help you do it. So not as in like doing it for you, but going like, oh, you don't know how to, edit this thing, how to duck music in your audio. This is how you do it. And then you go, oh, thanks. And then now you have that skill. What I have seen change now in terms of even just talking about those indie creators, the ones that really just want to make the things for themselves, is that there are more options to take that off of your plate. So people aren't starting from scratch, like making a cake with like, they're basically, sometimes there's a lot of boxed cakes now where you can go buy the box. And if you don't want to make it from scratch, you can actually get you can have the pre-mix, right?
Sure.
And so that's been a huge change. So there's a lot of people who are coming in where they know how to record their stuff, but they have zero idea what else is happening, because a lot of...
That's me. I don't know.
No.
I just record and then my team takes care of it.
Yes,
So
exactly.
I'm in that boat. Yeah.
And so then and again, there's no like bad stuff about that. It just means like there's less knowledge of all those things. And mind you, you obviously have other things that are more important to be taken care of, which is for a lot of us when we first started, this was our happy place. And we just wanted to do the thing. Like it was primarily our hobby. We wanted to have fun with it. We grew into how fun it was, and troubleshooting was actually part of the fun.
Right.
But now there's a lot of people who are coming in there that are looking at the power of the medium itself and wanting to use that to grow, insert whatever else you're looking to do. It's like it enhances already existing ideas or builds on them versus just doing it for its own sake.
Yeah, that's definitely a big change, and I could see how that's kind of morphed. And there are still certain, in certain instances, we still find people, I've been guests on shows where they're still, that involved person doing everything from beginning, middle, and end, and then there are others that are just handing it off. So there's still that spectrum, which is good. It offers more ability to entry for those people that don't want to learn those skills, and those people that want to and are interested in it, they can still participate as well too. So I've seen that. So I'd love to hear, as the director of community, right, how does a podcast or host or somebody who has a podcast, how do they go about building a community around their show? Are there one or two good tips that you can give our listeners that would allow them to do that?
Yeah, one of the key things I feel in terms of building community around your show is I'm a huge believer of starting with yourself first, and meaning, what does community mean to you first? Like, what are those things that you're like, oh, this feels really good to me. I really like the way that this community works, or I like first starting with yourself as to what that is, because online, especially now, community can be many different things in the online space. So that's number one step. But also to be able to see like what is the service that the community provides. That's something that you really do need to answer for yourself, because just because you want community around your podcast doesn't mean that the community will come, especially if it's not solving a very specific issue or problem that they want to address. And it can be as simple as, I just want to find other people that are like me that want to talk about this one thing. That could be as simple as it is, right? But for some other communities, it can be a little bit more intricate. Like, I know one of the other communities that I co-founded is She Podcasts. And one of the reasons that community really grew is because at that time, there wasn't a space where women felt comfortable asking technical questions about podcasting stuff. Because in a lot of other communities, you would say like, oh, what mic should I use? And there was a lot of jargon that came back that was way too complicated to understand.
Too complicated for me as well.
Yeah,
so I was there. I love that too. Sure.
And so it was too much. And so that space became a place where they could go, I don't know, I'm not sure what a mic even is. They felt okay asking those questions and getting the answers that worked for us, given certain things. Like, I don't know how to record with my kid constantly coming into the room. I don't know how to record. I don't have a man cave, if you will. It was very gendered at the beginning, especially centering around those conversations. And it became a place where people felt it was solving the problem that they were having at that time. I don't know how to make this podcasting thing work as a woman. And it makes me feel comfortable that I'm having this conversation here. And you also podcast. And my God, that's great. Right. So it solved that specific problem. And what we found is that that community really works the best when people can get immediate answers. As in, like, I'm looking for a microphone that's less than $100. And then there's all these people that say, oh, here are all the things. And they're like, oh, thanks. Bye-bye. And they'll leave.
Right.
So is that the type of community that you want? Or there are other communities that are very much centered around the networking aspect of it, where they come together and they do events together and they get together and they do stuff, right? So, or there's other communities that really exist just because they want to stay up to date on the latest and greatest around information, around a subject. Is that the type of community you want? Or that's the community, the stuff that your community is looking for? And also knowing, is it a fleeting type of a community? Like the first thing, and being a mom, this comes to mind a lot. When I first got pregnant with my first kid, I was really looking for information and community around being pregnant for the first time, right? And that's when I was like all in on all of that stuff. Like, I don't know how to do this. Like, is this normal? Like there was all of that stuff. But then once I had my kid, I didn't want anything to do with being pregnant anymore, right? So I left. And so is that the type of community you have? So you have to really think about what that is and then be able to provide solutions that answer that question for your community.
Yeah, those are great points. And again, we talk a lot about on here starting with the end in mind. So I think that's very similar, is to figure out what you want first and then kind of back into how to grow that. One of the things that I talk about or I find troubling sometimes is, with guests, right? So sometimes it's hard to be a guest, sometimes on some shows, because I feel like I'm better than the host, or sometimes it's, guests come on our show and they're not used to being a guest. What do you think makes a good podcast guest? What are a couple of attributes that, if you're going to be thinking about going on a show as a guest, that you have to keep in mind during that opportunity, or to be good, what does it take?
Yeah, that's a really curious question that you're putting to me, because there's so many different layers to this. There's the layer of you taking onus, like as in like, I'm coming to your show and I have to be prepared, right? And then there is the other aspect of it as a producer of a show and how you can create the best show that you can, regardless of who the guest is, right?
Agreed.
So there's those two sides of it. But as a personal, I think that one of the key things that I find in terms of bringing value to a podcast, especially if you haven't really done this. I've done this so many times that I don't really do a lot of this stuff. But when I first started, this was huge for me. And the number one thing is to listen to the podcast you're going to be a guest on.
Right.
Like, you got to get an idea of the vibe of what they're doing. You got to get an idea of like the types of conversations that are interested to their audience. And the third thing that I think is super important is, who is this podcast for? Because as a guest, being able to talk to the audience specifically is very important. Even if I'm not going like, hey, I'm not actually talking to your audience, but really I am.
Sure.
And right. And so understanding who the audience is great, because then you as a guest will automatically bring valuable insight to who that is. So it does take a little bit of time to figure that stuff out. I think the next thing that, you've done that really well in terms of providing how to be prepared for the show, but even just, and I've seen people kind of push back a little bit on this and providing some questions to your guest, right? And so as a guest, you read those questions and you do your very best to prepare for them, but don't hold on to them. So don't think like, oh, now I have to, like, this is the question that I'm going to be asked and I have to hold on. Just put your mind around those questions, but allow them to let go. Like, if that question doesn't come,
just happen and have conversation about
yes, totally.
Agreed.
And for some folks, it's a little bit more challenging to be able to do that. But if you write them down or like prepare yourself for it, that is enough, because it's already going into your subconscious. You've done the work. You don't have to like read it word for word, right? So those are some things I think as a guest is very important. And lastly, to just understand that this is serious. And I'm saying serious, I guess, not in the sense that like it's not a phone call. And I think this is where I've been a little frustrated at times when I have seen, like, I don't have a guest in my shows, like my shows are co-hosted, but there have been times when I have seen the lack of understanding of what you're actually doing. Like we are creating a piece of media, and the quality is it's audio. You got to make sure that you sound good.
I agree.
As best as you can, and put yourself in a position where you are in the best case scenario given your circumstances, and to be respectful of that.
Those are great points. And I would say, from a producer or somebody who runs a show, I think as a guest, I would say some things that you should be doing is preparing, sending out the expectations, where they need to go, what time, an overview of what's going to be talked about. Have a process, right? In place that you're going to be able to follow, because it'll take that pressure off the guests, because they'll know a little bit more of what to expect. I was just a guest on a podcast before I hopped on here, and I didn't even have the link of where I needed to go until 9:58, and we were hopping on at 10 a.m. That to me is not the way to do it, because I'm wondering, well, is this happening today? I blocked out the time. So having that process in place and keeping people in the loop, I think are key. And it makes for a much easier conversation because everybody has an idea of what's being expected. So, what do you have for somebody who's listening to this, maybe a business owner, entrepreneur, just a creative who's thinking about, hey, maybe I should get into podcasting. I've heard a lot about it. What advice do you have for somebody who's thinking about getting into podcasting?
Also, start with the end in mind, in the same way that you were alluding to before, right? Because there are times where you could really start a podcast purely to network. With no outlook to have it be lead generation, no outlook for you to be selling your services, no outlook to have it be part of your marketing campaign. In fact, you really don't even care about how many people actually listen to the show. But for you to be able to create key relationships with folks in your industry and start to build like a library of content of people that you have gotten to record with, all of those things are really valuable, because you get an opportunity, especially through this. I really love to see, I actually just talked about this in another conversation as well, that sometimes having this extra non-organic stuff around the conversation really forces a sense of focus on what you're talking about. So we have mics. And currently, maybe some people might see a little bit of this stuff. We have a camera, and it forces people to get very, very focused in being able to have a conversation. And that really empowers you as a business owner to really amp up those skills of communicating who you are, guiding somebody else's conversation, becoming better at being able to articulate not only who you are, but how to engage other people with conversation with you. You can build a rapport. There's all of these extra bits that become so great. And you're then able to have, like, now how you've connected with somebody else, like face to face and through their voice. That to me is like something people often overlook versus the end product of the media itself.
Yeah, I love that you now have this library, because I'm of the ilk of what you mentioned. We're not doing this with any specific monetary goal in mind or lead generation. I enjoy talking with people, and I think that we have some great conversations that I'm able to share with people. But one of the strategic byproducts of it has been, now when I'm having a conversation with somebody else who may need help, like after this show, maybe somebody's asking me about podcasting. Well, now I have a medium that I can just basically email them, text them, send them a link to, and say, hey, if you're thinking about it, listen to my conversation with Elsie from Libsyn, and this might add a lot of value to you, and people find that very helpful. So let me ask you a question. You started in 2006. You're 16, 17 years into this journey in podcasting. What has this experience taught you thus far?
Oh gosh. I think one of the biggest experiences that it's taught me is that being able to get your hands in the mix it can actually lead to almost anything. Meaning, in the same way you kind of called out that you essentially cultivated your position, you created what your job is essentially. I think, especially with tech, you can still do that, because from moment to moment, things are changing all the time. And being able to have your hands, at least in the pulse of the way that people communicate, and to be a little bit more open-minded at using new technologies, can really shift the trajectory of whatever you view as your profession, as your ability to be of service in the world. Because even just being able to, record, listen to my own voice, edit, have to write on social, like even if it was, back in the day, 140 characters or less, it really forced me to be a better marketer, a better person in selling things, recognizing the path of a new like a customer pathway that I hadn't known about before, simply from getting engaged with it. And then I found out that there were names for all of these things that I learned how to do, and it came from engagement and seeing real life results versus from the outside in, where somebody says, like, now you need to build an opt-in for lead generation. I would have been like, what is that?
Yeah.
But then I realized as I was doing, I'm already doing stuff like that. Okay, I get it. I see. Right.
You just didn't know what it was called. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are some great takeaways. And, Elsie, it's been great having you on the show. We end each of our shows by asking our guests the same question, because this is the Midland Money Mindset, and we love joy here. And that is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
Oh my gosh. Well, mind you, we are talking early in the morning, right? So I do have my little morning rituals, and it depends on what ritual it is. I love having my warm drink in the morning, whether it's coffee, because I love coffee, or sometimes I shift into, hot water and whatnot. But like the morning time for me is so precious. Just being by myself without having to engage with other humans, being able to get up in the morning and do my thing is incredibly amazing. And I have found great joy in being able to use fountain pens and ink and paper stationery. Like, those things can aesthetically bring me such joy and have been fundamental in being able to sort of like clear my head from all the digital tech stuff that I have to deal with on the daily.
Sure.
And so having a pen, like having my pens near me, sometimes I'll just touch them and open them up and then like scribble, and not even like write things that make any sense. I just want to use it and look at the pretty ink, and that can aesthetic joy of being able to connect with something in the real world it brings me joy daily. In all honesty, I just like touch my notebooks because I love them so.
Do you have a favorite pen?
A favorite pen right now? I actually do. It is the TWSBI Diamond 580.
Okay.
And it is like a one of those little pens that you like a vac filler.
Okay.
So you stick it in the ink and you turn it around and it just sucks the ink in there. And it's really cool because it's like it's the Iris TWSBI Diamond 580. And so it's got like this sort of iridescent rainbow vibe to it. Right. Although it's totally clear. And then the nib has this little iridescent rainbow thing to it. It's so beautiful.
Sounds really nice. I'll have to check it out. I'm not a pen enthusiast, but it sounds like a really nice pen. So I'll have to check it out.
I love it so much. It's so great. And my favorite inks are ones that like have shading to them. So like you write and then when you move the paper, you can see that they have different shades. And how the heck they do that? I don't know.
Well,
but it's so delightful to see.
That might be a whole nother podcast. Who knows,
I know,
right?
I know, totally.
So Elsie, listen,
Absolutely.
we're going to have all of your information in the show notes, but if people
Yes.
want to learn more about you, learn more about Libsyn, what is the easiest and best place for them to do that?
Oh my gosh, my podcast. I think if you listen to the feed, the official Libsyn podcast, I co-host that show with Rob Walsh. And we put it out 2 times a month. And also, I think if you check out videos over on the YouTube channel for Libsyn over at youtube.com/Libsyn, I do a lot of live events and I do a lot of videos there too, in addition to all of the other work that the team is doing. And I think that's one of the best ways to get to know us and Libsyn.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Thanks for taking time out of your day, especially early in the morning with us, and make it a great day.
Thank you.